Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this video is titled Air Sickness in Air Force Pilot Training. Now, it generally applies to probably any sort of military flight training. Now, anytime you put somebody in an airplane, air sickness is an aspect. Whether you were sitting in the back of my 777 or 727 going someplace, a little bit nervous, scared to fly, you could be queasy, people get sick. That's why in the seat backs, there are air sickness bags. I've taught civilian students. I've taught civilian aerobatics, and I've had a few students who had issues with air sickness. In fact, I had one student who seriously fought it doing aerobatics. In fact, he would become so nervous, and he was a big guy in the front cockpit. I'm in the back cockpit of the uh, Citabra, and he would physically shake, and he would get sick just about every flight. But he powered through. He got through it, and he got to the point where he loved aerobatics so much he was almost making me sick. After about the ninth consecutive snap roll, I said, let's take a break from that now. So you can get a hold of it. You can conquer it. But let's look at the T-37, which in the Air Force is what the guys start out in. Now you look at that. You got this nice big glass canopy. So you wouldn't think that you would feel confined. But by the time you put on the flight suit, the helmet, the oxygen mask, the parachute, strap this all in. And if you're going over water, you got the life preserver units, the LPUs. It gets pretty tight. And then you've got the stress of a military training program. You've got a syllabus that you adhere to, you have to progress through. There's a lot of pressure from the syllabus, from the program, and from the students themselves to succeed. And the thing about military pilot training is, okay, you're not sitting there with your checkbook. Every time you write a check, the instructor will come back for another one. You have to learn according to the syllabus. You have to learn quickly because these airplanes are expensive. And yeah, maybe you could learn in twice the amount of time they're willing to give you in the military program, but that means all down the line, you most likely will be a slow learner, and they don't have time for that. So there's a lot of pressure in this, and people can get sick. Now, here you have the ubiquitous air sickness bag. Now, in the Air Force, we had actually little plastic bags. And I had, he wasn't my student, but he belonged to another instructor. And we, every once in a while, you'd have a student fly with different instructors just so they'd get a little taste of, different techniques. And we were up flying, and he got sick. Okay, went through one bag. He got sick again, went through another bag. He got sick a total of 5 times. And he finally said, I'm getting sick again. I'm out of air sickness bags. Do you have one? And I said, no, I don't have one. I'm an instructor. I never get sick. So he says, oh, I know what to do. And he takes off his glove, and he ends up, yeah, you'll love this, vomiting into the glove. And I'm looking over there at this, and I see fluid dribbling from each of the fingertips as he's holding it. Yeah, that was an interesting experience for me. But one thing we also did, other than just simply have students, we would give rides in the various aircraft. It was kind of funny. Um, when I went up for my ride in Air Force ROTC in a T-33, I loved it. Well, I had taken a civilian aerobatics course. I had about 100 hours of flight time, and in that time, I took a civilian aerobatics course, and I just loved it. I wanted to fly aerobatics, and just had a great time. But on the people that I gave rides with, it was kind of interesting. Now, it's not a big sample size, but a lot of them, uh, especially the pilot candidates, they seemed nervous, probably because they knew that, this was what they were headed on to. And they were a little tight, nervous. They weren't really kind of enjoying it, and they actually didn't want to do too much. Now, some of the people who were just getting a ride, they weren't going to be a pilot in the Air Force, but they're getting this exposure. They actually enjoyed it quite a bit. In fact, I had one young lady who just thoroughly enjoyed aerobatics, and we got done, and I said to her, I said, you ought to consider putting in for pilot training. And this was back in the 70s when there were very few women at all in Air Force pilot training. And I said, you should really consider it because you seem to like this. But I don't know whatever happened to her, but she had the enthusiasm. Now, by the time you get to the T-38, you pretty much have this covered, but not necessarily. Um, for a student doing instruments, you're sitting in the back seat there. You've got a hood on. You can't see outside. These airplanes, move quite a bit, very dynamically. And during the instrument flights, the only time I ever in pilot training became queasy at all was in the back seat of a T-38 doing instrument work because the aircraft does move around a lot. Let's put it that way. Um, but that was my closest exposure. But by the time you get to T-38s, you pretty much have it handled. To get back to the student I was mentioning earlier, who went through 5 bags and then his glove, he powered through. Now, a lot of people have trouble, and you can wash out if you can't get air sickness under control because you can't go solo if you can't be depended not to get air sick. And you got to get a handle on it. You got to get it under control. You got to power through it. And I really admire the people who did. And this one student, um, he came up to me at graduation and he says, I made it. And I said, you sure as hell did. Because I knew that he had to really power through to get over his air sickness. Now, one other last comment I'd like to make, and it relates to giving rides. Um, they had some people that they were giving rides to in the T-38, and they had this one individual. He was a football player, a real jock, a he-man, and he got sick on the flight. Well, he was coming back. They put him in the back seat of a 38. That's where you get the ride from, because you're not qualified in the front. So he's in the back, and they're coming back, and he decides that he doesn't want anybody to see him carrying an air sickness bag. So he takes the bag, and canopy's open, and he just gently drops it over the side. Well, you see where the guy's sitting in the back seat. He's right next to that US there, and you see the intake there just in front of the stars and bars. Well, as he dropped the bag over, it went into the engine intake, and you wouldn't think it would do too much, but it caused a few problems in the engine. And the wing commander was not going to take any future hits on this. So when the guys were getting rides from then on, and hopefully this has gone away, this was Advanced Air Force Base back in the 70s. But what happened as a result of this one guy, the students in the back seat of the T-38 were not allowed to open the canopy until they got into parking and the engines were shut down. Well, the air conditioning system on the T-38 isn't the best. And these poor guys coming back would, if they weren't sick from the ride, they were probably sick from coming back because they were getting pretty overheated and dehydrated just because of this one individual's ego. So that's kind of a funny side story there. But military flying, it's not easy. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure from inside and out. And if you get airsick, you got to power through it, or unfortunately, you won't make it through the program. But thanks for watching.